Of course, we always start with the vocabulary, and our first word in this lesson is museum. Have you ever been to a museum? A museum is a place where important historical things are displayed. So people gather things from a long time ago and they put them in the museum because we can learn about how people lived in the past. And a museum is a good place to go to see these things. Next, we have artifact. So I just said we go to a museum to see these things from the past. These things, we can call them artifacts because an artifact is an object that was made a very long time ago. So when you go to the museum, you can see things that were made hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, made by people who lived a long time ago. And we call these things artifacts from the past. Okay. Carriage. Have you ever ridden in a carriage? Probably not. There used to be carriages everywhere, right? Many people used to ride in carriages in many countries all around the world. But a carriage is a kind of vehicle with wheels that was pulled by horses. So we have a horse-drawn carriage. Very common to say horse-drawn carriage, because drawn in this case means pulled. The horse is pulling the carriage. And in fact, as you can see, this is a modern picture, and in some parts of America, some people still live in an old traditional way. They don't believe in using cars or even electricity. They don't have cell phones. They don't use electric lights in their houses, and they don't use cars. Instead, they have horses and carriages to get around. And so you can still see this actually in some parts of America, like Pennsylvania, Ohio, in that area. Okay, so that's very interesting. But anyway, carriage is a horse-drawn carriage, an old type of transportation. Invention. An invention is something that someone has made for the first time. So if you grow older, or even now, if you have a great idea and you make something that has never been made before, and it's useful, many people want to use it, you might become a famous inventor, right? Because you have made a useful invention, something that someone has made for the first time. And of course, we see this picture. Who are these two famous inventors? Well, you can see their name. This is a French stamp, though. It's in French, but that's fine. Wilbur and Orville Wright. So it's Orville and Wilbur Wright, although Orville is spelled in the French way, and Wilbur Wright. The Wright brothers, what did they invent? They invented the airplane, or a flying machine. Okay, so they are famous inventors. But there's many famous inventors in history. Communicate. To communicate, that's a long word, isn't it? Communicate. Communicate. Basically, that means to express your ideas or your feelings or to exchange information. Right now, I'm communicating to you with the words that are coming out of my mouth, but I'm also communicating with you in other ways. I'm using body language. People can communicate without speaking. They can just communicate with their facial expressions. You can also communicate by writing something to someone or typing it on your computer. So there are many different ways to communicate with other people. And of course, animals communicate with each other as well, also by their body language, by the sounds they make, and by the actions that they do. That is also a type of communication. So there are many types of communication. Connect. Connect means to link two things together, to connect something to in this case, an electrical or communication system. So if you are connected to the internet, you use a cell phone or a computer to connect to the internet, to link to the internet, to be connected to it. Okay? Also, if you have a lamp, let's say you buy a new lamp, you take it home, you plug it into the wall, you connect the lamp to the electric system in your house. Okay, so to connect, to link two things together. In this case, we're talking about linking something to the electrical or communication system. Next, we have Telegraph. What is a telegraph? Of course, you don't remember. I don't remember, right? That's a very long time ago. People wanted to communicate over very long distances, but they didn't have computers. They didn't have the internet. They didn't even have telephones. What was the first way to communicate over a very long distance? Well, of course, you might think, oh, fires, yeah, and smoke, right? Korea had a very developed system to warn people of foreign invaders coming into the country with smoke, but a lot of countries did that. Sometimes they used drums, right? But smoke and fire were also good communication devices. But then they invented something that was called the telegraph, and the telegraph used wires and electricity, and you could spread the wires really far between two people. And if you typed or you tapped, basically the telegraph was just a little instrument, you tapped on it and it made a sound. Dit, 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 and you could hear that sound over the wire hundreds of miles or hundreds of kilometers, even thousands of kilometers away from each other. One person could tap on one part and another person on the other end of the wire could hear those taps. And what they did was they used short tap and a long tap. And that was called Morse code. Morse code. Morse code. And they had a series of dots and dashes. So dot, 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 right? So you could make letters. So these dots and these dashes corresponded to different letters of the alphabet. And so people who were very good at using the telegraph were called telegraph operators. Telegraph operators, they would sit there and they'd hit the little key, da, 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 and they were very good. They knew the code and they could send messages very far distances. So it's an electric system for sending a long distance message. And by the way, telegraph operators, they call them telegraph operators because they operated the telegraph machine. And of course, when telephones came later on, we got rid of telegraphs, but we kept the word operator. So it's very common on the phone, people would call and they just dial 0 for the operator, and they would say, operator, please connect me to so-and-so in New York. And the operator would make the call for you. Okay, so it's interesting. Words that are developed for one technology are sometimes carried over to the next technology. Okay, but anyway, telegraph. Okay, next, internet. Of course, we don't use telegraphs anymore. Whew, that would take all day to sit there, tap, 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 right? Now we use the internet and we don't just type, we don't just send words to each other, we send pictures and movies and sound. We get all sorts of different types of communication, can be transferred over the internet. And of course, the internet is a worldwide computer network. So we're not just talking about thousands of kilometers, we're talking about all over the world. Basically, anywhere, almost anywhere in the world you can go, you can get connected to the internet and communicate with somebody on the other side of the world. So we are living in a very fortunate time. You're very lucky, of course, to have the internet these days. Okay, well, that's our vocabulary for this lesson. Let's continue with the main ideas.
Lesson 9. Changes in people's lives. Museum. A place where important historical things are displayed. Artifact. An object that was made a very long time ago. Carriage. A kind of vehicle with wheels that is pulled by horses. Invention. Something that someone has made for the first time. Communicate. To express ideas or feelings, or to exchange information. Connect. To link something to an electrical or communication system. Telegraph. An electric system for sending a long-distance message. Internet. A worldwide computer network.